We're here at the Republican National Convention in St. Paul, Minnesota at the Excel Center. And now joining us, legendary host of Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman. I always like announcing you that way. How are you, Amy?
Very good, except for this.
Yeah, what is that, Amy?
Well, when you get arrested, they wrap this around your arm.
Oh, cool.
I know you thought it was hospital. It was only, one of our producers was in the hospital, but no, This is from the police, care of the St. Paul police.
So, Amy, one of the big stories of this convention was your arrest. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Yesterday, there are protesters, about 10,000 in all.
Probably more, yeah.
And what were your producers doing there?
Well, overwhelmingly peaceful protests. The march from, you had the backdrop was the dome of the Capitol here in St. Paul. And we covered that all morning. And then they went back to work at our offices, and they heard a commotion outside in the late afternoon, around 3, 4. And so Sharif Abdel-Qaddus and Nicole Salazar went down with the video camera, happened to be right near our offices at Jackson and 7th, and they saw the riot police on horseback, and they saw protesters. So they were covering this, and the police pushed the protesters into this parking lot. They were covering this. They were just videoing it. And suddenly the police move in kind of pincer motion from all directions. And they were saying move back, which is exactly what Nicole was doing, but it was a parking lot, so she was trapped by the cars. And so she was shouting as the police were moving in, riot police, press, showing her press credential. We all wear our press credentials, showing her press credentials, and of course she had her camera. They pushed her to the ground. They said face in the ground. So she's on her stomach. They've got either a boot or a knee. She couldn't determine between her shoulder blades. And another cop is pulling her leg, but she's got to keep her face in the ground, so it bloodies her face.
Wow.
So she's being arrested. They're handcuffing her, these hard plastic handcuffs that just dig into your wrists. Sharif was right next to her, and he's saying, guys, stop, calm down. She's a reporter. You can see she's a reporter. They throw him up against the wall. They bloody his arm. They push him down. They kick him in the chest twice and in the back, and he's got the wounds around him. They really tightly handcuff him. I am interviewing the Alaska delegates on the floor of, it's the first night of the Republican convention, and I'm spending the night, I think I'm going to spend the evening interviewing people there. I go over to the Minnesota delegation. I get a call from a producer, and they say, Sharif and Nicole are down. They've been arrested. They're bloodied. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I said, what are you talking about? I ran from the convention center. I even stopped a cop who was driving. I said, help me. Can I get in your car and we'll drive to the site? I got to get my reporters out of there. There must be some mistake. But anyway, no one picked me up, so I raced there with my videographer who was with me on the floor of the convention. And I see this line of riot police. They've completely contained the place, the parking lot. I go up to the police. And I asked to speak to their commanding officer. I said, you've got 2 of our producers in there. They need to be released. My convention credentials are very clear, as is my Democracy Now! ID. I just come from the floor, and I was wearing a jacket and all these in plain sight, hanging them around my neck. They saw exactly who I was. And they just grabbed me. They pulled me through the line. They forcibly pulled back my arms, put on these very tight, rigid plastic handcuffs. They forced me to a wall, pushed me down. I said, I demand to see my 2 reporters. I must see Nicole and Sharif. I see Sharif across the way, handcuffed with his ID in plain sight. I cannot find Nicole. I hear she has a bloody nose. I say it to the cops. I say, I understand she has a bloody nose. He says, so what? He said, I've been knifed in my life. I said, well, that's terrible, actually, but that's not because of us. This is because of you guys. I need to see my reporter. I need to know that she's okay, and she needs to be freed. We're allowed to do our work here, and we must do it unfettered. I said to them, look, I am so clearly a reporter. I showed them the top security clearance, journalism ID that gets us onto the floor, and then Secret Service comes over and they rip it off me.
Oh, really?
So I said, hey, wait a second, guys. I need a receipt that you took that. Of course, they didn't give it to me.
They didn't have a receipt available? Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
They do the photographing. They take my clothes. I never got them back.
They took your clothes?
No, my jacket that I was wearing on the floor of the convention, I said, guys, you have to give me my clothes back. They wouldn't.
So they literally took the jacket off your back.
Well, yeah.
And you still haven't gotten it back.
No.
So
then we go to, and then they put us in the in the wagon where Nicole was. She's wearing her press ID very clearly on her. I keep demanding to be freed. Where the people charged with misdemeanors is you're put in the police garage, and there are these cages there. So I am in there. I'm still demanding to be released. St. Paul cop just keeps yelling, "You shut up, you shut up." And after a few hours, I ultimately was charged and released. Nicole and Sharif are facing felony riot charges, believe it or not, PC riot, which is probable cause riot, so they go to jail. And then ultimately they were released last night, but we need these charges dropped against all of us. I demanded of the police chief this morning, but he said, well, we'll be investigating.
Amy, what are the charges against you?
Against me, it's obstruction of justice. Against them, it's riot. They haven't been charged. They were jailed. They haven't been charged, so they face those charges. Me, I was charged.
Mm-hmm. So what is the police? Did the police ever say to you, Amy, hey, back away, we are clearing this area? And
they weren't clearing the area because they had it totally contained. This was afterwards. I was running from the convention center, so I was a little Johnny-come-lately here. Mm-hmm. So they had the place contained.
So why do you think he arrested you?
The reporters were a ways away. I actually think for the same reason that our producers and the AP photographer were arrested, and that is because there's a kind of crackdown in this country that, well, there's two things. One is it's just a general sweep that's going on. You saw at the Republican convention in 2004 in New York, it was astounding. 1,800 people arrested. Ultimately, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. The charges were just dropped after. But what it allowed the police to do is hold them for days until President Bush spoke. And I think they were willing to pay the price. They paid out, I believe, hundreds of millions of dollars afterwards.
To those people who were arrested unjustly?
Yes, at least tens of millions.
Booyah, you're going to get paid then. All right, let's go get it.
No, that is not what I want to do. I want to do my work. But they feel the price is worth it somehow. They felt it there. I don't know about here. It was Minneapolis police, though we were downtown St. Paul, and the Secret Service, and then the St. Paul police entered into it in the jail. But it's unacceptable.
Do you think that it was directed at the press, or do you think that it was just...
It's a kind of sweep that's going on, though. I have to say, on Saturday when we flew in, we got a text when we were at the airport that the police are raiding a house of eyewitness video. Now, everyone knows in New York who eyewitness video is, particularly the police, because they were the ones that gathered all the video in 2004 of all the police activity around the city. And this is what led to hundreds of charges being dropped against people, because the police would say one thing and then the video would be produced and you'd see it was exactly as the person said. Sometimes they were just bystanders. So they came to document here. They suffered a preemptive raid, sort of like Minority Report, Tom Cruise, the pre-crime.
Right.
The police move in. They have a warrant for the house next door. That doesn't matter. They come in. They've got AR-15s, automatic weapon. They've got a pistol. They're moving into the living room. Everyone was huddled in the living room. Democracy Now! Producer Elizabeth Press was there with her camera, very scared because she was afraid they'd perceive it to be a gun somehow, so she put it above her head. They moved these people out into the backyard. They handcuffed them, held them for hours. Now, ultimately, they didn't charge them. It's so ridiculous. They absolutely couldn't. But they disrupt their work. And I think that what we're seeing is general sweeps, and reporters get caught up in those sweeps.
We're talking to Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Amy, some people on the other side, or, interested citizens would say, hey, but you know what? The police do have to keep order here. And there were some people who were smashing windows and lighting garbage cans on fire. So it's not that they thought all of you guys were dangerous, but they had to control the area. They had to contain it. They had to make sure that it didn't get out of control. So they're a little overzealous, but we understand why they were overzealous. Do you not buy into that?
I think that you're right, that there has to be, people have to deal with criminals, and the cops have to do that. But there are overwhelmingly peaceful demonstrations that they are moving in on, that they are exacerbating, provoking crowds. I thought it was interesting in my warrant, or it's probably not called a warrant, but the charge against me. It said obstructing a peace officer, right? That's what they're called. Not police, but peace officer.
And I saw it on
tape,
by the way.
And that's what they should be. They should be peace officers. You can resolve these things peacefully overall. But to move in when you've got, let's face it, they got tens of millions of dollars in federal money. And once you get the gear, you got to use the gear. They've got taser guns. It's like the atom bomb in 1945. They developed the bomb. They got to use it before the end. And they were developing it for the Germans, but, well, they drop it on the Japanese.
Well, Amy, I saw the tape of you getting arrested, and that guy did not look like a peace officer. And it's, when you look at the tape, it's on YouTube now, by the way, and it's got a couple 100,000 hits already. It's, of course, a little comical because you seem like the most harmless person on the planet, and a guy decides to arrest you. It seems quizzical, in fact. You're thinking, why is he bothering to arrest her? It seems like it's more of a pain to arrest her than not. But it was only about a minute long. Before the tape had started, had he told you to back away?
No, I had just come. What you saw is it, because I ran so fast from the convention center. Remember, I was called. I was doing interviews on the floor where we are right now. So I had to run there. It was already all over. I was terrified they were going to be taken away. What you saw was the entire interaction. I ran right up. I was completely out of breath. The line was right there, and that was the first what you saw is the first interaction I had.
So you say, "Hey, where are my producers? Can I see him? You're under arrest."
Yes,
that's it.
That was it. They pulled me through the police line. I didn't show. This is not like there was a lot of stuff before, and you just get that last second.
Right. Obstruction of justice, by the way, is the most classic way of arresting folks for no reason. Same exact thing happened to me in Hoboken many, many years ago. Not political at all. It's just a friend of mine and I had gotten into, a little bit of a yelling match with guys who turned out to be undercover officers, and they were basically harassing us, and we had no idea if they were cops or not, because they're undercover, and they won't show a badge. And then one of my friends said, "Hey, you're just harassing us because we're Asian," right? Because 75% of the guys there were Asian. And they, of course, took great offense to that, and that's an arresting offense. So instantly he was arrested. And they open up a door, and they throw him in there. And I said, "Whoa, I got to at least see a badge to know that you're cops," right? They said, "Okay, obstruction of justice," and they arrested him. So I know your story probably better than anybody else. What do we do next with it? I had it expunged from my record.
Well, this is a very serious question. Are they going to drop the charges? But I think it's much more serious than all of this. I mean, it's about the role of press in a democratic society. There's a reason why our profession is the only one explicitly protected by the U.S. Constitution, because we're supposed to be the check and balance on power. Yes, we are supposed to be there to observe, to watch, to witness. I went to the police chief's news conference this morning, Harrington, and I asked him about that. And I said, how are we supposed to operate in this kind of climate? And he said, you can embed yourselves in the police department. The new model of reporters embedded in the front lines of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, in order to be protected, in order not to have your camera broken or your face bloodied, you have to be embedded in the police department. That is not independent journalism. When you force the press to close their eyes, to close their ears, as you do when you arrest them, that is a threat to a democratic society.
I really wholeheartedly agree with you there, Amy, but I do want to ask you, though, in that situation where they're clearing the area with your producers originally, what do you think they should have done with them? I mean, given that they're clearing the area and they don't want anybody behind them.
It's very straightforward. They were in front of them,
right,
and they're pushing back, and they're saying, the police, and they're saying, move back, move back. Let them move back. Mm-hmm. Just let them move back. When you're trapped by cars behind you, she said, "Where do you want me to go?" Just say, "Get over there." So she was trapped. That's all.
See, how do we amend this? Because this happens all the time. I've seen it in crowds happen over and over, and it's not. Sometimes it's political, and sometimes it's not. It's just cops, when they get it in their head that they're going to.
You can't swoop down and arrest people. I mean, we have laws in this country, and you can't just move into an area and just sweep everyone up.
So how do we train the cops to contain the area forcefully, immediately, thoroughly,
well, I'll tell you something.
But at the same time respect people's rights and the press?
It doesn't help when in the weeks leading up to it, you talk about these anarchists, this violent element, these outsiders who are coming to hurt the delegates. Then you understand the press plays a role there too. On the one hand, I'm saying you can't shut down the press, but when they rev up that hate, as we came into town on Saturday, I started watching some of the coverage, and it was frightening. And if I knew nothing else, I would start to say, well, take your kids off the streets. This is frightening. This criminal element is coming into town. Who understands them? They're just criminals. As the police chief unfortunately said this morning at this news conference, we arrested close to 300 criminals. Well, maybe that was true, except that I knew that me and my producers were among that number. And since we know we're not, Well, what about all the other people here?
I've always believed that there are only 18 anarchists in the whole country. I don't think they really exist. I think it's a bunch of goofy kids who think it's a smart idea, and they're just looking to have fun. And then they get painted into the next Osama bin Laden. You know, they're coming after your kids. And it's a convenient excuse, but the mayor's Democrat, isn't he?
Yeah, we were arrested by Minneapolis police, interestingly enough.
Oh.
You know, there are all levels of authority that are working here right now, also the National Guard. But yes, it's true in St. Paul, but this was Minneapolis police, and it was Secret Service.
Right, I read in the paper today, in the local paper, that he considered their actions heroic. I was like, heroic? How much does it take to arrest
I wonder what
Amy
Thomas
Goodman?
Jefferson would think. You know, Thomas Jefferson said if he had a choice between a free press and a government, he would choose the free press. Mm-hmm. It's very serious. You see it in Iraq, you see it in Afghanistan, we see it all over the world. We need a media where people can express themselves, that exposes what is going on, doesn't just accept the government or the corporate line. I mean, that's what we also have to look at these conventions. The Democrats last week in Denver, we at Democracy Now! And democracynow.org expanded to 2 hours every day, and here in St. Paul at the Republican convention. That's the story in the suites here that people don't get to see. With the Democrats, it was over 1,000 events, many of them, hundreds of them, corporate-sponsored parties. And this is a socialization process for young legislators all over this country. Thousands come, both the Republican and Democratic convention, and they are feted by these largest corporations in the world. Who has that kind of access to politicians around the country? We got to get into all of these parties. In Denver, it was the Mile High station where AT&T first celebrated the Democrats who had given them retroactive immunity. Remember, Barack Obama flip-flopped on that. He said he would filibuster. Then he not only didn't filibuster, but he supported the retroactive immunity. Before we knew it, the delegates are all carrying around those black bags with the AT&T logo on them. And one of the first parties is the big AT&T party. Well, if delegates are going in there, I think press should go in there, because these are elected officials, many of them, not all of them, and we should follow them there.
A final question for you, Amy. You know, so following along those lines, there was an ABC reporter, a photographer, who was taking pictures of the corporate lobbyists meeting with the politicians.
Brian Ross's guy.
Right, and they beat him up and they choked him and they arrested him for doing his job. I mean, he couldn't have been more doing his job in order to protect, apparently, these lobbyist
meetings.
That is
very important.
So the final question is, given that this is the status of where we stand in America today, is there hope that for example, if Obama were to get elected, that we would have a healthier respect for the press going forward? Or is he just going to say, well, you know what, that winds up kind of helping me too, and if he does, how the hell do we turn it around?
Well, you know, I think it's all about movements. It's not about the men or the women. I think we see politicians shifting and changing. You never know even what stand they'll take once they're president. But what we do see is that they respond to pressure. And when the pressure is most powerful on the side of the corporations and the moneyed interests, then they respond to that. But there is an answer. It is not hopeless. It's people organizing for the good of humanity, whether it's global warming, whether it's ending war. And when enough pressure is brought, well, the politicians want your vote. They'll respond to that too.